Hey, how's it going, everybody, and welcome back into the SFS channel. My name is Gavin, and today I've got my top 24 wide receivers for week 1 of fantasy football action here. It's game day. We've got Buccaneers and Cowboys today, so we're getting these rankings in there before that game goes live. If you'd like some more rankings at other individual positions, it'll go all the way down to second and third tier level players for lineups, meaning that if your entire league was to start 3 or 4 of these players in their lineups, I will have all those rankings. So that means 50 plus running backs, wide receivers, and I'll be doing 32 quarterbacks, running backs, and then 32 quarterbacks, tight ends, and then all 32 of the defenses on top of that. That'll be accessible on my website, sizzlefantasy.com, under the SFS Gold membership package. It's just over $1 a week here if you were to purchase the entire month and go ahead and take advantage of that service. So go check that out. The link is in the description of today's video. With that being said, drop down, give today's video a like before we get started. Subscribe if you're new around here, and if you haven't done so already, turn the bell on so you're never late for an episode and never miss a piece of content or fancy advice for a given week. So without further ado, let's hit that intro and get straight into the 24 wide receivers. Alrighty, here we go, everyone. Just a quick note before we get started. Those rankings, I just want to preface this, will be out prior to game time. My goal is to have those uploaded into the website and prepared, ready to go for you all. I have the rankings. I just need to enter them to the site. That my goal is to have done by 12 p.m. Central Time. So those will be ready well before game time, and at the very latest, I would have those done sometime in the very afternoon, early afternoon, excuse me. So with that being said, Adam Thielen is my number 24 wide receiver. He's a player I'm not too high on this season, and I have my concerns about his touchdown dependency last year, but this week I am very optimistic, and I think his ceiling is quite high. I don't expect the Bengals, who already, in my opinion, had an average defense. They've got a bunch of corners that I believe are number 2 cornerbacks and aren't really capable of guarding a team's number 1 option. They are even weaker at the position than they were to begin with. Trey Wayne's their top option, and the guy who probably was the most likely to cover Justin Jefferson, the team, or the player rather, that I expect to be valued and approached as the Vikings' number 1 pass catcher, he's out of the game. So that has a trickle-down effect to Adam Thielen, where every other cornerback is going to be bumped up a slot on the depth chart. So they're going to be covering a player who is that next step better than them. And for a number 2 wide receiver in Adam Thielen, for his team, he could easily be another team's number 1 option. He's still a very talented player. The fact that I don't like him in fantasy has nothing to do with his talent. It's more of a product of his situation, the run-heavy Vikings offense, the fact that he was so touchdown-dependent last year, and the fact that Justin Jefferson was so dominant, and less of a factor of his actual role on this team. Thielen can come out this week and put up big numbers. I think that he has a chance to have one of his high ceiling games this week, and it should be a very favorable fantasy situation, so he's a player I'd love to see in lineups. Robby Anderson in a little bit of a homecoming game here against the Jets, his former football team. Robby was very impressive last year. He was the top targeted player in this Carolina Panthers offense. I think him and Sam come back, have a strong week. Again, another high upside play. The floor isn't amazing, but I still do project Robby Anderson to lead this team in targets this season. And in turn, I think that should have a very, very valuable situation this week and cause him to be an incredibly, again, high upside lineup play. I see him as a wide receiver 2 clearly this week because numbers 12 through 24 on this list are wide receiver 2s. But I think that despite him being so low on this list, I really like these players a lot this week, and I think he has a lot of potential to put up and produce very quality stats. T. Higgins against the Vikings. The other side of that Adam Thielen matchup here, the Vikings secondary isn't all that hot either. I talked about T. Higgins on my must-start wide receivers list. He's not a sit-and-forget type play on a given week, but this is a player who, again, a ton of upside. I could see him finding the end zone here. I think Joe Burrow's going to want to go to guys he's got chemistry with, and to me, that means T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. Jamar had his struggles with drops, and he had some issues in the preseason, so I think that elevates the role that T plays on this team before he gets back on track. Again, I said this already like 3 times in this video, but for a lot of these names down here on the list, very high upside this week, and the return you get for starting them could potentially be incredibly valuable. 2 lineups this week. One player I want to note that actually didn't make today's list that I think has the potential to have an exceptionally great game is Antonio Brown for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. There is some question marks whether or not Chris Godwin is actually going to be fully healthy, but he didn't make the team's final injury report, so all signs point to him being just fine. I have AB just barely outside this top 24 rankings list, and I think his upside is incredibly high against a Dallas defense that, let's be honest, their secondary is very, very thin. It's very poor. They do have some playmakers back there, but on a snap-for-snap coverage basis, when Antonio Brown can have a team's number 3 cover corner, that's a situation I love all day, and I'll take that every single day of the week. So again, he barely misses it here, but a player I'm advocating as a must-start player. He needs to be in lineups, and I just want to touch on that very quickly. Before I talk about DJ Moore for the Carolina Panthers, the other of the top 2 options, Terrace Marshall has looked very impressive in the preseason, but for now I'll take the established talent. I think Moore has the chance to make some very big plays against a young secondary with a lot of unproven players, and there's a lot of guys back there that have upside and potential to be quality NFL corners, but there's not guys that I feel like are absolute shutdown players. And when you have an offense with the personnel that the Panthers do, it's going to be very hard to cover every one of these players on a snap-per-snap basis. Someone's going to find some wiggle room. Someone's going to get open and free. I think that either Moore or Robby Anderson or Moore will have themselves a very, very nice day, and the other should have very strong numbers as well, even if their ceiling doesn't quite crack that elite territory. Brandon Aiyuk is here at my number 20 spot. This is a situation I love. I am still actively keeping an eye on his hamstring issue. This is something that we need to monitor, because if he tweaks that and has a setback prior to game time, he's going to be falling down my list, because players with hamstring injuries cannot cut. They don't have the same explosive abilities, and their play will see a dip in production as a result. So Brandon Aiyuk for now, until we hear worse news, is absolutely a must-start player and an asset I think that can't go overlooked here. Against the Lions team, I think the 49ers are just going to run them out of the stadium. I don't know of anybody in that secondary. I mean, Jeff Okudah was a top pick, but he struggled a lot last year. I don't think there's anyone that can hang with him. And his usage, the opportunities he gets in Kyle Shanahan's offense, set him up for success and have the opportunities to have a very productive week. So Aiyuk, another player I'm really liking here. Now, we're starting to get into some players that I think in general have really high upside and can be considered elite fantasy options. But in this middle tier here, it's less so players I love for their upside in stream value games. And I say that with quotation marks because I wouldn't consider Robby Anderson or some of the other names, Adam Thielen, to be true streams, but they do make the bottom end of this list because they're not as dependable players. Tyler Lockett's a guy who I think has the right and has earned more respect in the fantasy community as a higher ranked player, but his matchup this week is something I'm not a fan of. I still acknowledge the talent. I still acknowledge that he can make those plays happen, but his strength is making plays happen downfield, making incredible sideline toe-dragging catches, and just having elite chemistry with Russell Wilson. This Colts defense, the one thing they specialize in is they don't give up the big play. They will let you grit and grind long drives out down the field, but they're not going to let you hit a splash play on them over the top. And that's what Tyler Lockett does at an elite level. Now, he's a lot more than that. He can contribute in far many other ways. He's a very good route runner, and again, that chemistry with Russell Wilson will come through here. But the floor is lower and the ceiling is also lower this week in this matchup because of the way the Colts play coverage and because of the way they play defense. Diontae Johnson here, this is a strict volume play for me. I don't overly love his matchup this week, but at the same time, I don't hate it. He's a player who led the Steelers in targets last season. I think he's the top candidate to do so again this year. If he can just get out there, get his looks, and haul some passes in while staying healthy in the process, it should be a very strong week for him, and he should be considered a nice wide receiver to start. Allen Robinson, another name at this number 17 spot, I've got lower than I would like to have him. Look, you're going up against Jalen Ramsey. You're feeding Andy Dalton with a poor offensive line. He's not going to have much time in the pocket to a hungry lineup of Wolves led by Aaron Donald that is that Rams pass rush. I'm expecting a tough game for the Chicago offense. I think by week 3 we'll have Justin Fields in here, and the ceiling will vault for the overall production they can have as a unit. But look, this might be the toughest matchup A-Rob has all season this year. I expect him to get his looks and his targets, but it shouldn't be the expectation that he produces the same way he would in a normal matchup when he's playing arguably the league's best corner and one of the tightest press man corners in the league who can just stick with anyone in the game. So A-Rob naturally slips down the list a bit here as a product of his matchup. Cooper Kupp now against the Bears. The flip side of that matchup here at my number 16 spot. This is the opposite situation. I think that Cooper Kupp's going to get his volume like he always has. I think him and Matt Stafford are going to develop a nice chemistry here. But he's playing a secondary I like a bit more in terms of the fact that the Bears lost a lot of talent this offseason. They cut Kyle Fuller, and their best option on the table right now is Jalen Johnson, a third-round pick from last year's draft, who is very impressive, did have some nice flashes last year, but he's going to be pulled more of Robert Woods' way, which leaves the door wide open here for a team that just cut Desmond Trufant to exploit matchups and just be better than the man lineup across from him. In PPR leagues, I'm all over Kupp this week. I think he's got a really solid floor value, and if he hits a couple big plays or finds the end zone, you're looking at a very productive week for him. Chris Godwin. Now, this is right at the top end of the wide receiver 2 ranking spot. We're getting into the number 15 position, so these are the top 3 wide receiver 2s I've got for this week. I love the matchup. I love what I've seen from him and Tom Brady in terms of their chemistry in the preseason, and I think Chris Godwin's going to come out here, ultimately suit up and play this game, but we're still keeping an eye on that injury. Again, the quad, it was on the injury report, then it wasn't. We don't know what this is going to lead up to in game time. If I hear any talk about him being limited in his snaps or a reduction in his play time, that is concerning. That shows me he's not 100%, and the Bucs are afraid to play him to his full capabilities at risk of re-injury. So again, when your players have that questionable marker next to them, it's easy to just put them in there and think they'll be fine. It's important to know what the injury is, what the timeline is here, how healthy are they going into the game, and then to understand the nature of some of the injuries they're dealing with and how that impacts their performance. So a quad for a receiver who's running and trying to stay at full speed and separate from defenders, I'll be keeping my eye on that. I will send out an alert and announcement. I'll send out a little community post. If you're in the SFS community Discord, a quick little moment to promote that quickly. Join that. It's free. It's in the description of today's video, and it's just an interactive area for all of you to talk and interact. I'll post something in there if we get more news on the Chris Godwin injury, so another reason to go check that out, aside from the fact that you can get some fancy advice and information in there every once in a while and interact with me when I've got the time. So into the number 14 spot, Ceedee Lamb against Tampa Bay this week. It was hard for me to like either of the Dallas Cowboys wide receivers. I clearly like Ceedee Lamb more than Amari Cooper this week. Cooper's gotten a bad rap for his performance on the road to this point in his career. I love Amari Cooper. I love his game. But I think it's definitely something that's fair, and it's a fair criticism that he just has not produced as big as he has at home, or rather, he hasn't produced up to his expectations that he puts on display at home that he does on the road. And you might think to yourself, well, that should be the case. That should be expected. Players should play better at home. It's rather significant in the case of Amari Cooper. And when you talk about some young, feisty cornerbacks that play physical football and get up in your face, jam you, and play very aggressive, they grab jerseys, they do it all back there. That does not cater to Amari's game, who is a bit more of a finesse receiver. So I like Ceedee more this week as a route runner, a player who's going to get a lot of targets. I think that him and Dak Prescott will be the strongest Cowboy and quarterback wide receiver combo this season. I just like what I'm getting here. I don't love the matchup, but I expect the volume to be good. I think Tampa Bay is going to walk out here and score a bunch of points, and that's going to tip the hand of the Cowboys and force them to try and force the ball and do the same. So Ceedee up here at the number 14 spot. Julio Jones at the number 13 spot, the number 1 wide receiver 2 for me this week. I love the matchup against the Cardinals. This is a weak secondary, and despite the fact I don't think Julio is going to have elite volume this year in Tennessee, despite the fact I have my long-term concerns about his health, he's going to come out here, and if Ryan Tannehill is 100% ready and not rusty from that COVID spout, if the head coach comes back, Mike Vrabel, and they don't have any issues and clunkiness, they're going to put up huge numbers against Arizona in the run game, in the pass game. It doesn't matter. This is going to be an incredibly efficient week for the Titans. They're going to hang some points on the Cardinals' heads. It should be a nice matchup. I expect that at the end of the day, if Julio plays this whole game healthy, he should have himself a very, very strong and productive day. Keenan Allen is my lowest ranked wide receiver 1 this week at the wide receiver 12 position. The volume is why I like him here this week. Washington's defense is lethal. While they might not have one of the game's top corners, they do have 2 very, very quality corners that can do a dang good job at just blanketing a guy for a couple seconds. That being Kendall Fuller and that being William Jackson, who they picked up in free agency from the Cincinnati Bengals. Those 2 players are good enough to hold a top-notch receiver for as long as it takes for that lethal pass rush to at least disrupt Justin Herbert. Maybe they don't pull off the sack. But this is going to be an offense that is under some stress this week. Austin Eckler's on the injury report right now. We don't exactly know what that's going to look like come game time. there's some moving pieces here, and we like Keenan Allen because he is a target monster, and he is a volume beast here in fantasy football, but I don't like this matchup, and I think that the defense at all levels can impact Keenan's fantasy week here in week 1. Robert Woods, I've got at my number 11 position playing the Bears. Again, he will draw the top coverage, I assume, in Jalen Johnson, but that's nothing he can't beat. I think Robert Woods has, again, some of that really great usage, similar to Brandon Aiyuk that we love. He gets plays in the wide receiver screen game, or he gets plays in the wide receiver run game as well, and then he's running routes downfield, making plays happen there. So I think his floor every week is fantastic. I think the matchup's pretty nice as well. Robert Woods should be a very steady play this week, and then Terry McLaurin into the 10 spot. I love his upside. Every week when you've got Fitzmagic throwing you the ball, flip a coin. Is he going to go off this week? I mean, Terry McLaurin might have a lower floor than he has in the past, despite the fact that he's played with terrible quarterback play in his entire career. Fitzmagic is the same situation in terms of the not-so-great floor that Terry gives us, but the ceiling is as high as ever. You get a gunslinger who's going to chuck the ball down the field to you, and you've got a player of that height, that size, that speed that can make plays like he can. This is a win-win here. Even against the Chargers, who do have some playmakers in the secondary, Terry's going to go out there and make things happen this week, and I just feel confident that he's going to be a quality start. DK Metcalf, lower on the list, and him and Tyler Lockett take a knock here. He's down at the number 9 spot. This Colts defense, they have a big physical corner that can match DK Metcalf. I'm not saying Xavier Rhodes is going to clamp him in this game, but he is going to get up in his face. He is going to play physical football, and he had a very dang good season last year with the Colts and kind of revived his career after it ended in Minnesota not so hot. They're not going to shadow. They're going to keep Xavier Rhodes on one side of the field probably, but when DK lines up over there, that's not a matchup I like. Kenny Moore on the other side is no joke either. They're not going to let up the big play. If there's anyone that's going to do it, it's DK Metcalf, and if anyone can break that secondary and hit a 60-yard bomb over the top, it's him. But again, there is the risk here. The situation indicates to me that this is going to be a bit of a tougher matchup than I think we're giving them credit for. Last season, one of my best must-sit players of the year that I predicted was A.J. Brown against the Colts defense for this same reason. He had one catch on the night, had a really rough performance, and scored like literally 1.5 points in half PPR formats. So this is why I don't like this matchup this week. Again, I think that DK could make something happen. I do not advocate to completely outright sit him, but it is a risk we face this week, and I think the floor is a lot lower than it would be in a normal matchup. A.J. Brown, same situation against the Cardinals as Julio Jones. I love the matchup. There's not a corner on this roster that scares me, especially for a physical player like A.J. Brown. Start him. He's going to put up nice numbers. Basically an unstoppable player. I wish he'd get more volume. Mike Evans against the Dallas Cowboys this week, another matchup I'm loving. These Tampa Bay receivers have an incredible luxury this week, and you talk about giving me the best volume player in the red zone for this team. Gronk or Mike Evans could have a monster week down there. Maybe the running backs even have a monster week, but I get the same level of cornerback matchups. Now, Mike Evans will probably draw the Cowboys' number 1, that being Trayvon Diggs. But that's not an unbeatable matchup. I mean, he can go out there and moss Trayvon. He can go out there and literally do what he did last season, just catch a 2-yard touchdown pass. There's a lot of ways that I think Mike Evans can go about getting his points, so I am very high on him this week as opposed to the entire season outlook here. I am not as enthused about him. But again, here in week 1, give me Mike Evans all day, every day. Justin Jefferson. We talked about this with Adam Thielen at the start of the video. They're down Trey Wayne, Cincinnati, that is, the opposing defense for Minnesota. That's their top corner. Everyone else gets bumped up a notch here, and you're going to be asking them to guard the most elite route-running wide receiver in that 2020 rookie class. Now, you can debate me, Jerry Jeudy or Justin Jefferson, but the smooth play style, the quick twitch ability, and how he just slides in and out and open on the field just is amazing from what Justin Jefferson does. He literally looks like he runs routes at the level of a Davante Adams caliber player, and he's been in the league for 1 year. So Justin Jefferson's ceiling is getting off point here. It's sky high. The things that he could do and the level of player he could reach is ridiculous. But this week, he's going to feast in this matchup. If Kirk Cousins can hold it together, avoid getting COVID, it's going to be a great season for Justin Jefferson, and he's going to be probably a player who has the upside where he could win your week for you this week, just on the fact that he could go out here and score 30-plus in a PPR league because of the volume he could see, because he's just going to be beating his matchup every time. No corner on this Bengals roster can hang with Justin Jefferson in a 3-second drop. If Kirk gets time in the pocket, game over. Justin Jefferson is going to put up huge numbers. Stefon Diggs is a tough matchup, not something I love, but it's Stefon Diggs. He's going to get his volume. Josh Allen's going to chuck the ball to him downfield. They're probably going to hit on at least one of them. Joe Hayden is a very respectable NFL corner. I don't think he can hang with Stefon Diggs downfield. The one thing that's tough here is the Pittsburgh Steelers have a slew of pass rushers, but Josh Allen literally doesn't take no for an answer, and he does not get sacked. He will run around backwards 30 yards and then chuck it 70 yards downfield to gain 40. He's got that type of arm. He can just make those plays happen. I expect that he's going to be under pressure, might make a few wild throws, make a few interceptions, have some turnovers, lose a fumble, whatever it might be. But I think Stefon's still going to get his numbers. He'll still see his looks, get his opportunities. I'm not worried about his fantasy week this go around here, even in a tougher matchup. Calvin Ridley against the Eagles at the number 4 spot. Again, they've got Darius Slay. He's one nice corner for this Eagles roster. They've got some other names there as well. But I don't think at the end of the day any of them can hang with Calvin Ridley. If you give Matt Ryan the pocket protection he needs, and this Eagles defense does have some quality pass rushers, they do dial up the blitz every once in a while. But at the end of the day, there's no one here that can stop Calvin Ridley. He is such an elite route runner. He's so crisp. He's quick twitch. This is going to be a high-scoring game, and I think that the Falcons secondary is going to be incredibly exploited by Philadelphia, and I think on the flip side of things, with all the pass catchers, Calvin Ridley, Russell Gage, Kyle Pitts, they're going to make their own plays as well. So Calvin should be just fine this week. His ceiling is great every time around. Tyreek Hill is my number 3 this week against Cleveland. This is going to be a fantastic football game. I said this in a previous episode this week. Go check out those episodes again if you haven't done so already. The links to all the videos I posted for Week 1 advice are in the description of today's episode. But man, this Browns-Chiefs matchup, getting this game Week 1, is going to be really fun to watch. There's a chance that they just go back and forth and have a shootout here. I think that since it is Week 1, the offenses are going to be a little bit more tame than usual. And typically what we see happen in the first couple weeks of the season is we see more defensive battles and more lower scoring games than we do later on in the year. That might be the trend here, but Tyreek Hill, no one can hang with him in terms of track speed. He's also a great route runner. If he gets open, he can make a big play. He's a threat every single time he touches the football. We know Tyreek Hill by now. No reason not to have him on your radars. DeAndre Hopkins is my number 2 wide receiver. This is a matchup I am crazy about. Janoris Jenkins and Christian Fulton are the top 2 corners for the Tennessee Titans, and the Titans also don't really have a quality pass rusher. They do have Bud Dupree, but he's coming off a significant injury and playing for a new team, which notably does not have TJ Watt rushing on the other side of him. So he is going to have to win against either the Cardinals' best pass protector, or he's going to be double covered or chipped by a running back. He's not going to have a free rush at Kyler Murray, and even if he does, that dude is so quick and elusive that it might not even matter at that point. D-Hop's going to get his volume. He has some of the best hands in the league. He had the best catch percentage of any wide receiver in the league last year in terms of what percentage of the passes thrown to him were actually caught. And his touchdown count was incredibly low last year for the amount of receptions and targets he had. So I love the upside this week. D-Hop absolutely deserves to be valued as one of the best fantasy football wide receivers here in Week 1, and he will continue to put up numbers like that for this entire season. And then lastly, Davante Adams here. No player has the immense target share for their team that he has. Marshawn Lattimore, Jalen Ramsey. Whoever it is, I believe there are 2 players in the National Football League that are immune to the coverage lined up across from them. Davante Adams being the number 1, and DeAndre Hopkins being that second player. Both of them seem to be the only guys who can produce against Jalen Ramsey. We saw Adams do it in the playoffs last season when the Packers played the Rams in the wild card round, the divisional round. And we've seen DeAndre Hopkins do it multiple times with the Texans and the Cardinals, playing Ramsey as a Jaguar and a Ram. So 2 of the players I'd feel safest about their floors on a week-to-week basis. Adams was the only player above 30% of a target share. Stefon Diggs was down there at 30 last season, but again, a 4% leap over any other player for their respective teams' target share numbers. That's ridiculous. There's no other consistent, clear number 2 option on this team, so he has no competition for targets from Aaron Rodgers. It is the Davante Adams and Aaron Rodgers dink and dunk fest all day long. He scores more touchdowns than anyone else in the league, and again, matchup proof. Can't concern me with anyone lined up on the other side of the ball from him. He's a must-start, sit-and-forget type player each and every single week, as are Tyreek Hill and DeAndre Hopkins, respectively, probably even Calvin Ridley, Stefon Diggs, but even more so to this extent. Adams is going to get his looks. He's going to get his numbers. The only thing that can hold him back is an injury. Alrighty, those were my top 24 wide receivers for week 1 of 2021 fantasy football. If you enjoyed today's video, drop a like. If you haven't done so already, subscribe and click that bell to turn that on if you're new around here and haven't done that yet. You don't want to miss an episode. I respond to comments, I get back to you guys, and try to be the most interactive fantasy football channel out there. I want to help you guys in your leagues. I truly mean that. Eric and I want to get back to you and help you be the best players you can be this year. Go check out SFS Gold. The link to that, again, is in the description of today's video on sizzlefantasy.com. And again, please let me know if you guys have any questions about your fantasy leagues. I'd love to help you all out. And let's do this thing together. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Peace out.